Hey, it's Sylvan, and this is the Handpan Podcast. This episode is part 2 of a short series of 2 separate conversations I had with Michael Barticel. The first chat we had was made for his podcast, the Good People Effect podcast. That's part 1. And this conversation you're about to hear was made for the Handpan podcast. This is part 2 that you're listening to. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I think you should, because you get to listen in on this really cool conversation that happened between 2 complete strangers. I feel like I had an instant connection with Michael, and in part 1, he's actually interviewing me, so I'm on the opposite side of your typical episode of the Handpan podcast. Of course, you always hear snippets from me here and there through my reactions and interactions with guests of this show. But part 1 is by far the most information I've shared about my own journey on this podcast, which is kind of why I called this series There's More to That Story. Okay, now turning to this episode. What you're about to hear could be a news headline or even a movie plot. Someone who sold all their possessions to travel the world. The thing is, it's about more than that. He's about more than that. I am privileged to dive into the reasons, the struggles, and the lessons of Michael's life and the role that the handpan played for him. So here we go. Okay, great. Well, Michael, thank you for joining me for this episode. It's so good to chat with you again.
Thanks for having me on the show, and thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to have another conversation because I feel like the last one we had was very enjoyable.
Yes, and I feel like we need to give some background for listeners. This feels like part 2 of a conversation between you and me because part 1 happened on your podcast, the Good People Effect podcast. And we'll get into that in a moment. But you were incredibly kind to invite me on your show, and it feels great to now kind of turn the table and get to hear more about your story. An obvious place to start is you have a really cool accent. Michael, where are you from?
Thank you. It's an Aussie accent, and I'm from Melbourne, Australia. It's kind of like the south part of the country.
And what time is it there right now?
So at the moment, I'm on Vancouver Island in Canada. So it's actually about midday. Where I'm from, I think it's like the next day and some change. So it's quite difficult to stay in touch with people from home. But I'm on Vancouver Island at the moment. It's about midday.
Oh, that's great. What brings you to Vancouver Island?
Well, I'm on it's kind of like a workaway experience. I really wanted to visit British Columbia. I felt like there was a lot of natural beauty that I wanted to experience here. And I was trying to find a way to do it while still working on the podcast. And I met a guy online that does they're kind of like adventure wildlife tours. So we go out on the boat and there's like bear watching and we, from a distance, we look at wildlife, whales and it's eagles. It's an amazing thing, and it sounded great online, and he needed someone to help him run a bed and breakfast on Vancouver Island. And I kind of made a little video and sent it to him. And here I am. So I'm here. I've been here for a couple of months now, and I've got about another 6 weeks to go.
Wow. Man, that sounds like a remarkable experience among many, many travel experiences that you've had. And I'm going to ask you about that. One of the things that I noticed right away when you reached out to me and I checked out some of your art is the term Today Dreamer. This is your domain name for your website, todaydreamer.com. It's also your handle on social media, on Instagram. What does Today Dreamer mean to you?
That's an awesome question. No one's actually ever asked me that before. So Today Dreamer for me is the idea of having dreams daily, but also acting on them and really kind of not sweeping anything under the rug, not kind of daydreaming, and trying to be as much as you can, in the moment, or something we spoke about in our last conversation as well. Trying to live in the moment as much as possible and letting go of the times that we're not able to do so, but really just taking action. It's like a little reminder to myself to take action on the dreams that I have, and really, use the tools that I have at my disposal to create something.
That's a beautiful juxtaposition, because you're right. Oftentimes the term dreamer becomes a caricature, right, of someone who just lives in their inner world, which is important, but who doesn't take action. And you come across to me as someone who's really balanced that, cultivating and nurturing your creative, imaginative world, but also pursuing some really adventurous experiences. So it's just a beautiful picture of a third way, an alternative to really balance those things. Where does that originate?
I don't think I could point it to a single origin, but I guess through all my experiences and just different situations that I've been in, and kind of analyzing the outcome afterwards, and trying to learn from certain things that happen, that were in situations that we're in, and try to see things from as many perspectives as possible. I guess I've just developed into who I am. I can't really say it was one thing more than another. But I really feel like the message that, your imagination is what reality actually is an important one that I've learned for myself.
Mm-hmm. And so you're a filmmaker, a photographer, a handpan player. Talk to me about this creative itch that you've scratched. What are some of the paths that you've explored, tapping into your creativity?
I don't know if I've sort of scratched it just yet, to be honest, Sylvain. I feel like it's like a constant game, I guess, and I want to develop further, and I feel like I'm honestly in a lot of ways just beginning my journey. I guess if I was going to kind of start from some point, it would probably be I went into school to study advertising, and I felt kind of drawn to advertising. And this is another lesson that I've kind of figured out just recently, and really kind of experiences when you're drawn to something and you follow it. It's interesting what happens in comparison to when you don't. And anyways, so I got into advertising, and I studied advertising for a little while. And then I went off and weirdly enough got a job at a bank. And I worked at the bank for a little while, and I just felt myself slipping away. And I didn't feel like the life I was living was right for me. I felt like there was something kind of wrong on the inside. So I decided to save up some money and go on a bit of an adventure to Europe for 3 months. And that adventure, although it was in my early 20s, there was a lot of kind of partying and chasing girls and doing things that, I don't know, it's just like it was a younger version of me. I learned a lot from that experience, and I was exposed to, different kinds of scenarios, as you are when you travel. Mm-hmm. And there was this course on creativity. I kind of left the advertising thing behind, but there was this course on creativity that I was trying to get into. And they accept only the 50 students out of all the entries, thousands of entries from the country. And I tried before, and I just didn't get in. But I didn't put much effort into the application. And while I was kind of traveling, I was in Serbia, where a lot of my family's from. And I realized that I really wanted to, I wanted to get into this course. I wanted to try again. So I got back home, put some time and energy into the best application I could kind of put together. And I got in. I was like super happy, and things were going really well, because this was a 16-week course and of intense kind of creative thinking and ideas. And I'd heard really good things about it. And it was called Award School. And it really led into a career in advertising in a different way, and I wouldn't say easier, but in a shorter period of time than 3 years at university.
Mm-hmm.
So then completed this course, did okay, and then I couldn't get a job in advertising, and I was really struggling. And I met a girl at that point, and there was an unusual set of circumstances, and we'd only known each other for a short period of time, and she fell pregnant. And at that point, everything seemed to, because it's a very complicated kind of topic, and really kind of intricate and unusual, really. But it was kind of like something that I wasn't ready for at that time. I didn't feel I was the person I needed to be a father for a child, and goes into my history of not having a father myself, and is very kind of complex. The set of circumstances, what actually happened, and the whole scenario was really hard. It was a hard time. And now, coming out of that, I'm really blessed to have the most beautiful son in the world, and I'm so happy that I've got this kind of little ray of light in my life.
Wow.
But this was a kind of something that happened that was really shook my world upside down, inside out. It was crazy, and those choices I needed to make, and they all seemed like the wrong path. And during this time, I actually met the handpan, and I feel like the instrument was in a way a companion to me. And the handpan was always there, always ready to play with me and sing to me and work with me while I worked with myself. So then I got this job in advertising anyways in the end, and I was working on, my job was as a creative, thinking of ideas for ads. So we would work with different mediums, whether it was radio, digital, outdoor, and we would need to think of ideas for a brief. And this I guess, creative flexing of the muscle, the creative muscle, and kind of looking at things from different angles and trying to figure out things and come up with those light bulb moments, those insights, really was a great time. But there was another side to advertising that I felt quite difficult to deal with, and that was that I was creating for sometimes great things like the Lost Dogs Home, but there was also things like gambling companies, brands that were just kind of not aligned with my internal values. And I felt like I wasn't creating for me. I felt like I was creating for something else that wasn't true to who I was. So I ended up leaving, and I wanted to find out a bit more about who I am. So I went on this journey. I sold a lot of my things, and I left my handpan behind, actually, which is another thing we can get into. But I had a bunch of stuff, and I really miss my handpan a lot, and I can't wait to reunite with her. But I went on this journey, and now I'm kind of putting all my focus into the podcast and helping other people as much as I can. And I guess that's some insight into where the creativity was developed, I guess. But in terms of where it kind of originated, it's pretty hard to say.
Yeah. You've gone through a lot. It's we can hear the transformation, the transformative process, which takes time. It's not, one day you wake up and everything's different. And I can also see that you're someone who's drawn to purpose, and how working for clients in the advertising world whose purpose you don't align with would be really difficult. So now that you get to create content that fits into your worldview and your values, has that been a fulfilling experience?
I feel like it must be a fulfilling experience. Like, it must have affected me on some level, but it's not something I guess I recognize. I feel like it might be an internal thing. Like, for example, do you feel like with your conversations on the Handpan podcast that you grow through these conversations, even though you might not notice it, straight away afterwards?
That's an excellent question. We talked about this last time on our previous conversation. Really, the act of publishing a finished podcast episode is anticlimactic. It's nothing happens. There's no fireworks. There's no one cheering you up, congratulating you for all the work you put in. So really, the value comes right now. And I should even say that you reaching out to me a couple months ago was incredibly invigorating, because I think culturally we're not good at talking with strangers, because you and I had never met. We have a lot of common friends, I think, in the handpan world, but we had never spoken. We had never met in person. So I find a lot of value in that. But kind of back to your question and to your point, yeah, perhaps the value is in the process, not so much in the result. So it's in the journey, not the destination. Does that speak to you? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it's definitely in the journey. It seems like one of those cliches we always hear, though. Right? It seems like that, it's all about the journey and not about the destination. But it's so funny how these cliches kind of have another layer, because a lot of them, obviously, they're based on a lot of truth and they've become cliches for a reason. But it is definitely about experiencing as much as you can and being open to the journey and following. It's something I was thinking about a little bit earlier, is like kind of following where you're following how you feel. If you feel like going in a direction and it feels right, you just follow it. Like, I feel like it's an important thing that I've learned, and I feel like I've learned that the hard way or in a difficult way. That really makes the lesson a lot stronger.
So you made that choice to leave that job, sell your stuff, and travel. That's a bold move. Did it feel bold at the time when you did that?
It was a decision that I made quite a long time before I was able to do it. And it did feel, I guess, I'm not sure if bold's the right word. It felt scary. It felt like it was something that I needed to do to be the best person I could be for the ones around me and to learn more about myself. But it didn't feel like it would have been a walk in the park. It felt like, in a way, I was going into the dark lands and I didn't know what I would face. But I didn't feel like I had a choice, because if I wouldn't have gone with my calling, I feel like the alternative would have been a lot more difficult. It's kind of, in a way, letting go and just allowing instead of fighting what you know is true within you. But I mean, all that wasn't in my head at the time. I just felt it, I guess.
Yeah. So then walk me through what happened. Where did these travels take you? What kind of adventures did you go on, and for how long?
So I left around May last year, and I found some cheap tickets to Hawaii, and I went there for a little while, and I was couch surfing, and I ended up having some great adventures in nature with someone I met through someone else, which is another great kind of great thing about traveling and connection and new friends. And then after there, I went to Colombia, and all this time I really wanted to, develop the podcast. I had already kind of created the Good People Effect, and I wanted to continue with it, but I started making videos because that's what felt right at the time. And I felt it very difficult to juggle having experiences while traveling, or being open to as many as possible, with work on, a YouTube channel or making YouTube videos, and also creating podcast episodes. So it was really just work versus play. So I got a place in Colombia for a month. It was actually in a dangerous little town, which I didn't realize when I booked it. And I was just in this house for a month, and I got super lonely. But I got a lot of things done, and I moved forward in a lot of different ways. And then from Colombia, I headed south. I went to Ecuador, a little bit in Peru, and went to Chile. And then after that, I went to Costa Rica and had an amazing experience there and met some amazing humans there. And I don't know how much detail to go into. It's been quite a while. It was about a year and a half of traveling, and now I'm here on Vancouver Island, and I've still got a little bit more to go. And then I'm going to be heading back to Melbourne to spend some time with my son. And the podcast is really my focus at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I feel all these adventures have been great, but they've kind of led me back in a way to the podcast. And I think it's kind of interesting now looking at this back and seeing what happened with creativity and advertising, and how I kind of stopped for a while and got a job at the bank and then traveled and then came back to it with more kind of focus and intention as well. And I think I've done the same thing, I feel, with the podcast now, and I'm really in this stage with it where I'm really happy that it's in my life and that I created it, and that I have the chance to speak and meet people like yourself and, have conversations and be able to, maybe have a little influence on other people's lives and help them on their journeys.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you're being, I thank you for being honest about the ups and downs of traveling. Oftentimes we romanticize this idea of just backpacking and just traveling through South America or Europe. Or have you had any bad or tough experiences?
I definitely had difficult ones. I wouldn't call them bad though. And I kind of look at things as though they've all got their importance, whether we see them as good or bad in the moment. And through traveling, yeah, I've had plenty of difficult experience. I would even say sometimes on a daily basis. So there was a lot of struggles with loneliness, like I mentioned in Colombia, and the juggling of working and feeling like I'm not doing enough, I guess, to really, lighten up my own creative spirit and to create, but also, daily challenges, like, getting on the wrong bus and ending up, nearly in a different country, or waiting at the border for 19 hours with a lot of Venezuelan people that are just, struggling, and hearing their stories and learning that the struggle that I'm going through right now by waiting here is nothing compared to what they're going through, having to leave their country and kind of, make their own way, and going through robberies, and going through situations where there's been a lot of danger, I guess, and kind of violence. There's been a lot of difficult situations, even with relationships, and it's been complicated, but I feel like these are all good. Like I wouldn't change any of that, and I think they're also an important part of who I am, and I welcome any challenge, because I feel like that way I can move closer towards myself.
It sounds like creativity, even though you were not able to travel with your handpan, still played a role in your time away. What are some of the outlets that where you could sort of scratch that creative itch?
Well, so many. I feel like with the videos, creating videos and just mucking around with that medium, and just creating soundscapes. So I've been recording sounds of nature in places I've been going and mucking around with that. Other instruments I've found to be really kind of useful companions, because it helps me kind of stay within that, I don't know what you want to call it, that frequency of playing and enjoying music. I recently bought a flute, which I've been playing, a Native American flute, which is on the easier side to learn, and it's a lot of fun to muck around with, and I can see patterns between learning that and the handpan. I've always been really connected to percussion for some reason, and I had a really strong attraction to it. So when I was in Costa Rica, I was playing a lot of like the djembe, and there was a world-class percussionist there that I was kind of vibing with and jamming with, which was a lot of fun. And shout out to Gabriel. But yeah, just anything I've been able to write a little bit, anything at all that I can kind of find that I've been able to find. But yeah, it is quite a challenge traveling without the instrument at the same time. Have you spent in your years as a handpan artist, have you spent much time away from your instrument at all?
No, barely. There was one period of time when I first moved to the US. I lived in the state of New York, and my girlfriend at the time, lived in Minnesota, so a 3-hour flight away. And I once let her borrow my hong for 2 months, and I didn't have any sort of instrument, any hong handpan for those 2 months. And honestly, it was probably a good thing, but I had a little bit of an identity crisis, because I think we can attach so much of who we are or who we want to be to these instruments, which are obviously so cool. So I do appreciate the challenge, the difficulty in traveling without your handpan. Did you consider it before you left? Was it out of the question because it was too bulky? What was the decision like?
That was a very difficult one. I went through a couple of months of just going crazy and just losing it and trying to figure out what I'd take on the trip. I was trying to kind of organize and control everything before I left, and made sure that I got the weight down as low as possible, but I still had some cameras to make some videos and audio equipment and stuff to be able to keep going on the podcast down the road if I felt like it. Mm-hmm. Plus my clothes and toiletries and everything they usually take. Plus I tried to find the right bag, and then I didn't know what clothes I would have, because it was kind of like one set of clothes for a long period of time. And then the handpan on top of that, it was like I really wanted to take the pan, but it felt like, I don't know, it was a very difficult thing, because yeah, it is quite delicate, it is quite fragile, mm-hmm. and the amount of joy I'd get from playing it would have been crazy. But I thought to myself, I would always be able to send the handpan to myself. And I even got a smaller handpan. I got a Miram from Asachan.
Oh yeah.
And I sold my other pans to my best friend and my brother, so they were kind of still in reach if I wanted to have a jam. And got like a small case, and I was ready to go with the handpan, but then it was just too much stuff. Like, it was a lot of weight, and I didn't feel light, and I felt like in a lot of ways it would be amazing to be with my instrument, and in other ways it would be a real struggle. But now looking back, like, I've tried sending it to myself, and it's been super expensive. And looking back, I don't know. I might have taken it. I don't think I'll ever leave my handpan again, or a handpan anyways. So I really can't wait to get back and start jamming and playing every day and just reconnecting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like obviously it's been a rich lesson to be that long without this creative tool that has brought so much good in your life. And at the same time, I can't help but think that perhaps it has brought you to a sense of balance. That's contentment right there, right? Like being good with plenty and being good when we are lacking things. And
yeah, 100%. And I think it kind of ties into what you were saying about, sometimes we can, become so attached to certain things, whether it's the handpan or even, the video camera or another part of us that that becomes, a larger and larger part of who we are. Mm-hmm. And I think it's good to be able to, somehow find periods of time without those things, so we can kind of release ourselves from having to have it, and kind of, but not get rid of it totally, obviously, keep it in our lives if it makes us happy, but so we don't, we're not kind of always surrounded by something, and we're not totally, what that thing is, because we're a lot more than that. And I feel like sometimes it's hard when we're so engulfed in, like, for example, filmmaking, when you're just filmmaking every day and you want to get better and you're learning and you're loving it. But it's important to balance out your life with other things and some time away from the camera.
Yeah. There might be some value in keeping some moments private, to maybe exploring doing a handpan fast for a certain duration, to not become shuffled into a loss of identity.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like a lot of times in life, and I read something about this when I was reading Letters to a Stoic, Seneca. It was talking about not like going without, for example, having the means to have delicious meals every day and dress in kind of luxurious clothing, but like going without that, going on fasts and living, like in his scenario and his specific example, I think he said something like, it was, even if you're like a rich man, you would live as a poor man would live, just to know that you can go without, which in some weird way makes you a lot stronger. And if that time ever did come, or that day ever did come, everything wouldn't fall apart, because you know that you can adapt to the change. And I felt that in my own life in a lot of different instances. So I think it's good to exercise that every now and then. But for me, in my personal scenario, I think it was a little bit too long. and yeah, I can't wait to kind of reconnect. Have you ever come across that within your own journey, along your own journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a whole movement of minimalism that's growing in the West. And it's this idea that less is more, that you gain value from decluttering and trying to go without things that you once thought were essential. And you realize that there are very, very few essential things in your life, which are going to be obviously your shelter, transportation, clothing, food, utilities, the basic necessities. But a tool, a creative tool, even as amazing and remarkable as the handpan, it is not an essential in a sense.
But how amazing is its capability to facilitate those experiences? That's something to wonder at.
Mm-hmm. And the connections with other like-minded enthusiasts. And I know that community of handpan enthusiasts is growing rapidly where you're from. I've heard so much about Pan Oz, the handpan gathering there, to which I think you've been a part of. Tell me a bit about the handpan community and the connections that you've made around this instrument back home.
Oh, that's such a good question, Sylvain. That's the best. That just makes me smile, and I can hear the smile in your voice as you're saying that as well. Pan Oz is so dear to my heart, because it's such a special, it's just such a special environment that's created by Adrian, Jeremy, Tim, Tom, all the guys there. It's just a beautiful setting where you can just be. You can really just be. And it's in a beautiful place. There's an old church that's by the ocean, along one of the greatest roads in the world, the Great Ocean Road. It's a beautiful drive. If you've never had a chance to visit this part of Australia, then next time you're there, definitely go for a drive down the Great Ocean Road. But you get to this old church, and it's so beautiful, because within that church there's a little stage, and people come and they play, and there's little performances that go on, and then during the day you kind of interact with one another and with nature. And it's it's just such a special environment, and I've made so many great connections there. I was actually went there before I even had an instrument, and one came up for a flash sale, a Halo Voyager in F, and I ended up getting my first handpan after the night before, being a little bit like upset about not winning the lottery, I guess, because they had like a little lottery for the chance to purchase a couple of pans. And it's just such a great place, and so many amazing people that I've met, that I've had on the show as well, and had chats with. And it really just, I don't know, it really just made me feel like I was in the right place while I was there. And I can't wait to go back in January and kind of see how it's developed now. Because that was the very first Panos I went to, and then I went to another one a couple of years later. But yeah, I'm excited to see what's happening, what it's going to be like, because every time it's a new individual experience, like anything, I guess. But There like to explore more gatherings. I've never been to any other gatherings. Would you be able to point me in the right direction? Are there any that you could kind of highlight as maybe being some of your favorites, or ones that you've had really special experiences at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had the chance to go to a number of wonderful handpan gatherings, and I really appreciate the art of gathering. As the handpan art form grows, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It is now a global phenomenon, a global community. And I think inevitably we're going to start seeing some handpan festivals that will be a little bit more structured like traditional music festivals, with performers and spectators. I understand that in any art form there's an incredible amount of talent, and that should be celebrated. But I think what I'm interested in is the art of gathering, where instead of performers and spectators, you're all participants, and you're all equal. And it sounds like it's what you experienced at Panos. I just went to this remarkable sort of last-minute event put together by Chef D and Josh Rivera in North Carolina in the U.S. And David Gallagher described it as planning a camping trip with friends. There was leadership and organization, but that leadership consisted of getting out of the way. So there were no announcements. The way that they did concerts was really inventive and very forgiving and inviting to not just the folks who have been playing for 10 years, but the folks who have never played in public. And to me, those kinds of events are so transformative. I just love that.
Yeah, they're really powerful, and it's so nice to hear that that these kind of events happen, or to know about them, because before, I guess, stepping into the dimension of the handpan, I had no idea, had no clue, and it's a very special thing. I think because of the special energy around the instrument, special, interesting. I can't even use words to explain it, but things happen that don't normally happen. And it's such a beautiful instrument that's kind of crafted with a lot of intention, and that spreads so much positive energy. And I guess a gathering around that instrument automatically seems to kind of invite the same type of vibrations. I'm just throwing out words, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I like gatherings though in general as well, especially ones that are really thoughtfully put together. We have at home, I've got a circle of friends, and we have something called conversation parties. And what we do is we invite a bunch of people, and they can invite other people, and we sit in a circle and we just throw random questions into like a jar. And then we pull them out and we just talk about them, and they can be as big or small and whatever's on your mind. Like, would you prefer Inception or Interstellar? Or they could be like, what do you think happens after you die? So, and then we just talk, and gatherings, it's just a beautiful thing if they're done in a conscious way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, how rare that is in the culture for people who don't know each other to actually get together. I just think that it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen a lot. So when you're back, do you have any projects, any ideas of how you're gonna mix this all together and sort of engage in that next step of your creative adventure?
Yes, and I was actually just thinking about some of that earlier today. This morning when I woke up, I was thinking about taking things and combining everything together. But I want to do it in a gradual process where I'm really taking my time. I'm in no rush, and I haven't gotten a perfect picture of the end goal. I kind of just want to do a lot of what we were saying and just follow my intuition and work on myself and see how this thing evolves and kind of ride the wave rather than trying to force anything. I remember in our last conversation you were talking about, building things better and not bigger, and doing things with a sense of, I guess, authenticity. So that's the way I want to approach the podcast, and all my kind of focus and energy is on the podcast at the moment. I really want to be able to, it's called the good people effect, because I want to be able to surround listeners with the right people to help them grow and just be around other conscious humans on this rock, and just kind of being able to kind of tune into each other's frequencies and just move forward together. And it's based on creativity, adventure, and purposeful living. And I feel like that's where my intention and my focus is at the moment. And I want to develop it to a point where I just continue to have these amazing conversations, like with people like yourself and a lot of other guests that I've had. It's just been like a really great time. So I'm growing and I'm developing while also helping listeners on their personal journeys. And I'm doing something that I want to be doing. I'm using my creativity and kind of focusing it in like a laser in my chosen direction. And that's kind of where I'm heading. I want to incorporate video down the track. I want to get some video going down the track, but I don't want to rush things. The handpan's still a very integral part of the show. I want to increase that, and I want to add some different things in with the handpan. I'm very excited about the good people effect, as you can tell, because I really believe in it. And I really believe that if we look within, and we work on ourselves, then the people around us will get some of this effect. And if we listen in to the stories and experiences and journeys of other people, and we're open to them and open to, like you said, looking at things from new perspectives and what people have to say, then we will grow, and the people around us will get some of that effect. And it's just like this contagious kind of momentum that we're kind of putting out there into the universe.
Yeah. Well, it's a great service to all of us. I've listened to a few of your podcast episodes and browsed through the rest and seen all the different topics and the wide array of people that you've had on your show. It's just so valuable to hear. And I do want to encourage you. Obviously, you don't need me to say this. You already know it, but to take your time, to give yourself space, because what the topics that you touch on, they're very intentional. They're very good, deep conversations. And sometimes that requires taking time and giving yourself space to also recharge your own creative battery to be able to produce that content. We live in a day and age where podcasts and YouTube channels and albums and music and just media content in general is supposed to be put out regularly, like a factory. Have you experienced some of the pressure of having to release, having to publish, and how have you dealt with kind of giving you space?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I kind of believe in both sides of the story. Like, I feel like you should be able to just release things when things feel natural and not force them force them out or feel like you need to stick to a timeline that's kind of self-imposed because you've opened up to the pressure of the outside world. But I still feel in the same breath to move forward. It kind of needs to be like, for me anyways, like I'm playing in my own space and time, but I know how the other side of the fence works, and I want to be able to, I guess, dip into that side from time to time and put some, extended periods of focus and work into things, but always allow for that balance to have time to be able to develop the creativity, like you mentioned, and the experiences, and open up and live, really, because it can get quite demanding and it can get quite frustrating and feel wrong, or doesn't feel unnatural to continually push content out like a factory on a consistent basis. Just I think it depends on what the intention is behind it and what the reason is, and that's something that I think it's worth looking within and just kind of thinking about for all of us that create, because at the end of the day, I really believe creation should be for itself so that you can create, and these pressures are kind of they make things difficult. It's a lesson I learned again really recently when I went to Costa Rica and I spent some time there and came out with some amazing revelations. I was a month in the jungle, immersed in nature, and I got the chance to really think about things from a lot of different perspectives and angles, which I really felt like has improved me immensely in the way my outlook on things, and helped me, I guess, get through certain things. But one of the main lessons was that time, there's no rush, there's no speed, there's no that I need to be going at, or there's no time that I need to have certain things done. At the same time, I still need to put the internal effort in and work ethic. But everything else is like, just allow things to be naturally, and that's kind of the way it should be. Like, why should there be a certain pressure? It doesn't need to be there if I choose not to allow it to be. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that it really comes full circle with this phrase that you coined, today dreamer, because you really embody that contemplative approach, but also taking action. And that's really inspiring because we can be leaning too much one way or the other. So it's a good balance a good model that you give us here. And really for folks listening, todaydreamer.com, the Good People Effect podcast is about to launch season 2, right, Michael?
That's right, season 2.
With lots of just great people that you're going to learn from. And again, you were incredibly kind to have me on your show. Thank you so much for being here, for taking the time to share a bit of your story. And I just so look forward to continuing to share in the journey, because so much of what you do and what I do align. And I just look forward to being in relationship, even though we're very, very far away, a world apart.
Yeah, me too. And thank you so much, Sylvain, for having me on the show and coming onto my show and having a chat with me. I remember after the conversation, I was glowing. Like, my partner looked at me and she's like, "Why are you so happy?" I was like, "I just had an amazing conversation with like a new friend." And it was really nice feeling. So thank you so much as well. I've got much gratitude I want to send your way. And I'm keen to maybe even have a jam one day if we run into each other.
Oh, we must.
At a gathering or wherever else.
Well, I think it's inevitable. I have a strong feeling our paths will cross soon, and I really want to visit Australia. So,
I know it's coming up.
I know. Yeah. Well, this was awesome. Thank you for being courageous to reach out to a stranger and making a new friend. I'm really appreciative, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Okay, Sylvain. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. That's it for this two-parter series with Michael Barticel. You can find him at today.dreamer on Instagram, and he's the host of the Good People Effect podcast. We covered a lot of ground between those two episodes. If you want to react, you can do that via our private Facebook group, the Handpan Podcast Community. And as always, you will find show notes and more at thehandpanpodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, and talk to you in the next one.